Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to lobbyists in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
And I call the honourable member for Kooyong.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, the corridors of this House are roamed by lobbyists, given free rein to talk to whichever politicians they please. Too often they are close and old friends of some of our ministers and staffers, hired because of their personal connections and useful to corporate interests because they open doors that 99.9% of Australians will never have access to. This is a broken system. The most powerful people in our country spend vastly more time speaking to employees of lobbying firms than they do to people on JobSeeker, to tradies, to students, to small business people or to refugees. Lobbying firms and powerful corporations are experts at political persuasion. They've figured out how to turn politicians' personal relationships into profit, and the loser is the Australian people. Public servants and elected representatives must act with integrity, transparency and honesty. In recent decades in Australia, we've seen access and influence skew increasingly to the interests of businesses and powerful individuals. Lobbying aims to influence government decisions such as policy making, legislation, procurement and grants. Over the last 30 years, commercial lobbying in Australia has grown into a lucrative multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. It's hard to think that industry and those private interests don't expect a return on their massive investment. At a federal level, our lobbyist code of conduct applies only to professional or third-party lobbyists placed on a register of lobbyists operating under an administrative code of conduct. That code of conduct is inadequate. In-house lobbyists are not subject to the code of conduct, and they're not included on the lobbyist registry. Almost 1,800 in-house lobbyists currently hold orange passes, giving them unrestricted access to secure areas of Parliament House. We don't know who they are. We don't know who gave them access. Only 1 in 4 of our lobbyists is actually on our register of lobbyists. We don't know who our government representatives are meeting with, and we don't know why. Responsibility for monitoring lobbyists' activities in Parliament House lies with the Attorney-General's Department, but this is a toothless system. The penalty for any breach of the code is deregistration from the register, but no fine, a punishment approximately as severe as being whacked about the face with a tissue. Ministerial and staff diaries are an invaluable accountability mechanism. They help the public know who has access to our ministers, and they help to know those issues of interest to those who do have access to the ministers. We should know about the timing, the frequency and the nature of representations made to ministers and senior staffers by lobbyists. Ministerial and staffer salaries are paid by public funds. It is difficult to conceive of any rational basis for refusing publication of those diaries. Another integrity concern is former politicians, senior political staff and high-ranking government officials leaving office, then taking on related roles in the private sector and lobbying on behalf of their new employees, the so-called revolving door. 1 in 4 former ministers takes on a role with a senior special interest group after leaving politics, and nearly 40% of our registered federal lobbyists work for the government in some role before they became lobbyists. How cosy. Mr Speaker, lobbying is a legitimate part of the democratic process, but it must be carried out ethically and transparently. Our ministerial standards and lobbying codes of conduct are sketchy, they're limited and they're unenforceable. The regime imposes weak rules with no independent oversight and no real punishments for infringement. These rules do not ensure integrity or transparency. It is no wonder that the public has such little faith in the integrity of what goes on in this place, that it fears that influence can be bought in this country. Our Electoral Act should be amended to legislate a lobbying regime replacing and expanding upon the current toothless lobbying code of conduct. Administrative responsibility for that code should be placed with the Attorney-General's Department, and the Anti-Corruption Commission should have the ability to investigate breaches of that code. We need more transparency over ministers' diaries. We have to enforce revolving door bans. The people of Australia deserve to have faith in the integrity of their government.